All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to our event today. This event is actually Mr. Wedlake's idea. When we had to cancel our camp, Mr. Knight and I were pretty much heartbroken. And he said, well, if you're going to take something away, put something in its stead. He said, how about we have a town hall? And I thought it was a brilliant idea, and I really appreciate him bringing that to table. And so I want to thank you guys for joining us for this town hall and hearing from these amazing Kenpoists. Now, I don't need to make introductions for any of our special guests today. You guys already know who they are, but what I want to tell you is who they are to us. These people have been an amazing support structure for us. Sigung's parting gift to us was the relationship of the remaining three horsemen. They are on our master council. They were all gracious enough to accept that request. And when we have trouble, martially or personally, those are the people that we call. They have our back 100%, and that means everything to us. So in light of this being an event about Sigung, which everything we do is about Sigung, we're going to be starting with Sigung's stories. And we're going to be going in order. I'll be asking the same questions to all of our guests. We'll be starting with Mr. and Mrs. White, move on to Mr. Sepulveda, and we'll be finishing up with Mr. Wedlake. At the end, we will be doing live questions from the audience. We're going to ask that you enter those into chat. And Mr. Knight has been gracious enough to be my personal assistant today, gathering some of the best questions so we can bring those to our panel. There he is, as always, supportive, to bring those to our panel as we go. So I'd like to start by introducing our first special guest, Mr. and Mrs. White. I want to start with their valuable training resources. They have a Patreon site, and in that site, they have countless training videos for all levels of students. And if you have not had the opportunity to train with them, you have that opportunity through that Patreon site. I'm a member of it, and I highly recommend it. If you know anything about Mr. Knight and I, when we have great love and affection for people, things, pets, we give nicknames. And we like to always talk about how our names rhyme with the Whites, which they do. But we also know that Mr. White is a really big sports fan. And as a sports fan, Mr. Knight has a nickname for you, sir, that I'm going to unveil today, which is the Great Bobino. You can demote him. Don't demote me, sir. So with love and affection, that's one of your many nicknames. Sir is first and foremost. And then I want to end before I move on to our questions with the Whites. What Sigung told us about the Whites. Like I said, these relationships are so valuable to us. And you would always refer to the two of you as an absolute class act. So my husband and I, other than having our names rhyme, we want to be like you guys when we grow up. We really appreciate you coming to be a part of this event today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start with the first question. We want to share stories, favorite memories, and carriers of the bounty torch. And we'd love to hear what you guys have to say about your time and your memories with Sigung.
All right, I'll go ahead and start, Barb.
Okay.
If you don't mind. I first met him at the California State Karate Championships in San Francisco. And I think he won that year. He just was somebody that was always up on stage wearing Mr. Parker's patch, representing Kenpo. And I wanted to be like him. You mentioned you want to be like me or Barbara when we grow up. Well, I wanted to be like him. I just had a lot of respect for him immediately. I've shared this story before. When he was competing, one of the guys in his division lost his fight, took off his black belt, and threw it on the ground. And Sigung went over and picked it up and put it in a trash can. He goes, if that's the respect he has for his belt, then that's where it belongs. And I knew immediately this was somebody that I wanted to get to know better and to emulate. That somebody that really stood for honor and integrity and carried himself in a manner in which our students coming up through the ranks could look to and admire and aspire to be like. And I never was disappointed. 50 years later, I still have the same love and respect for him. He just was somebody that epitomized leadership by the example that he set, the way he carried himself, the way he treated other people. Just somebody that I just grew to like, but then I grew to love as time went on. You know, we all have heroes, and he certainly was one of mine.
Us.
On my end, can you guys hear me okay? My voice is not as loud, but you can hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You know, when I got to know Steve when he came to our home and he came to our tournament that we put on for royal families, and he always struck me as such a dignified individual. And you could tell he had integrity within him, and I really I admire that, and I remember that. One thing that I've carried over from some of the things that he's taught is when his I think I mentioned this in the women's symposium, that he said, "Not me, not today," in a women's self-defense class or in a self-defense class he was teaching. And I've carried that over. I think he would like it if he knew that every class that I teach, I use that, and it's a kind of a reminder of what he's taught. It just is living on within my class, and I hope to honor him that way. He stayed with us many times, and you know, he's just you say class act, he's a class act.
That's wonderful. And that's one of my favorite Seagum sentiments. And I remember the first class that I heard it as well. It literally gave me goosebumps. And so I knew that if it made me feel that sense of empowerment, it would do the same thing for others. So I love hearing that echo with you guys as well. Now, you guys have both been teaching for a tremendous amount of time. What message would you leave to your students, or what kind of legacy would you want to leave behind?
I would like my students, we just completed, brought up to date, a family tree that we have. And there's a saying that I talk about often is about nobody knows how much you know or cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's kind of a corny saying, but I would want my students to know that I took a personal interest in them and that I really cared if they did well or not. And I tried to set an example of work ethic and commitment and compassion and passion for the art of Kenpo, and try to create a culture of helping others and being in service to others. You know, I really want that. I'm not saying that I've reached it all the time, but that's what I would aspire to do. And Barbara, I know we're on the same page, is how we could help people, be in service to people. And even a white belt that's been here for 2 weeks could help somebody who's just walking in the door. And we have that culture at our school. It becomes contagious, and everybody kind of gets on the same page of being in service to others. And that's what I would really want. Long after I'm gone, I want to see people sharing Kenpo with each other and just trying to continue in the art and grow in the art.
What I would like to convey, besides everything that Bob said, which I echo so much and I won't repeat it. It's something I read this morning. I was reading Proverbs in the Bible, and it's in chapter 4, and it says, keep your eyes straight on the path. Don't look to the right, to the left. Don't deviate off the path. And in your path of Kenpo, keep your eyes on Kenpo. And there's going to be a lot of times in your life, or the student's life, all of our lives, when things come up and we could get off course, but get ourselves back on course. Don't quit. Have fun, enjoy it. Keep your eyes on where you want to go on your goal, and don't quit.
That resounding "don't quit." I think, Mr. White, it's in your school. There's something posting saying, I never met an adult that was happy they were allowed to quit as a child. Am I correct, sir?
That is correct. I don't know if there's anybody, I see a bunch of people up on the screen. I think everybody could pretty much attest to that. A lot of people have been around for a long time, and we always have adults come back that left as a child, and they consistently say the same thing. In fact, my own daughter has said that. You know, why'd you ever let me quit? And the reality of it, if we stay on them and we encourage them to stay the course, like Barbara was talking about, then they get the rewards they never thought that they were capable of reaching. But it's such such a journey. You know, that was aptly named, those books that came out for a specific reason. It is a journey, and it's interesting to watch different people's paths.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, for the both of you, the most important thing that you have learned or gained from your Kenpo training, what would that be?
Well, can I go?
No, I don't.
You know what? The more and more I study Kenpo, and I'm a student forever, it's such an unbelievably awesome, dynamic art. I mean, it's overwhelmingly detailed to everything. And the more I teach it and learn it, the more I know how much detail is put into our Kenpo and how important each detail is to how we perform our Kenpo. And it's always astounds me at the brilliance that went into this art. I'm always learning, I'm always having fun, and I'm always impressed by the little hidden messages within Kenpo.
Good. I like the simple formula that John Wooden had on success, and that's basics, conditioning, and unity. And basics and conditioning are somewhat the physical part, but the unity is something to me that's been so much fun and so amazing, the relationships that you form. And I think if it wasn't for the relationships, my friendships with John Sepulveda, Lee Wedlake, and many, many others, I mean, that really just builds the value of what we get to do for a career. And I just feel so fortunate. The relationships I have with my students, I think I've always been involved in athletics, and I know that you have to keep yourself fit. You have to, and you have to work out like it's, you develop your physical skills, which helps you mentally. There's no question about that. But I think finding the right people, because we're judged by the people that we spend time with. I really know that's true. And I want to try to set an example for our students of living properly and trying to do the things that move our art forward. And if you want to have great friends, you better be a great friend. And if you want to have great instructors working for you, you better treat them with respect and let them develop their style and their personality. And it's funny how the people you spend your time with have a direct influence on your thought process and the way you conduct yourself. So anytime I could spend time with our black belts or with John or Lee, or of course I get to live with my hero, my wife, that makes such a tremendous difference in your outlook and how you treat people. And I think that's really what I've learned about having a successful school, and we have for many, many years. And I think the key to being able to have that is about relationships and maintaining the integrity in what you do. I feel very blessed that I've been able to be surrounded by people I genuinely like and respect.
Beautifully said, sir. All right, and then my last question for both of you comes in 3 parts. We're looking for one priceless piece of advice for those of us who wish to be a great student, a great teacher, and a great school owner.
Okay. A great student. Remember that this is a journey, that you're not in a hurry. Don't quit. Give back. And remain humble.
Good.
Succinct.
Go ahead. You want to go?
I said that's succinct.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. To be a great student, I think just the willingness to learn, the willingness to have fun, and realize that exceptional martial artists have exceptional basics. And if you really apply, and it's such an ongoing process that, we all have a style. I had a style when I was 25 and 30 years old, but I don't have that same style anymore because your physical attributes might wane, and you have to keep a realistic assessment of your abilities. So your style has to change throughout the years. Maybe other people don't, but I know I certainly have. I always love to kick people in the head. I still can. I just have to fight much shorter people. So, you make a realistic adjustment. on your ability, and that's how you become a great student. I think is instill that willingness to learn and the willingness to have fun. I just work out and get the idea of delayed gratification versus immediate gratification. You know, every time you do these exercises and maybe you stretch and maybe it's stressful at the time and hard on you, but it pays off dividends as time goes on. And then you end up with the best students that have that. I think your other question too, Rebecca, was how to be a good studio owner.
Yes, sir.
I think it's creating a culture. And the culture is this work ethic that becomes a habit. We don't want to mistake activity for achievement. Just because you walk in the door doesn't mean you're going to get the most out of the class. Have a plan. Do an inventory on your abilities. I say that often because I know that at least it worked for me. Do have an inventory on what it is you want to improve on and then take those steps to make it happen. Just like I know Senior Master Sepulveda just built a big barn. Well, before he built that barn, he had a plan. And he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he worked that plan, and now it's shaping up to be this beautiful building. And that's what we got to do with our students. We tell them we have a plan for you. Here's the curriculum. Here's where we're going to go. And trust me, and we'll get there together. But it has to be that unity, as I talked about earlier. It's a team that can get them there. I want people, when they walk in the door, to know they're part of the team. And I'll do my best to do my part.
Sir. Excellent. Excellent. Well, I appreciate you both joining us today. Please stick around. We're going to have questions from the audience here in a moment and get a lot more info and insights from you both. We're going to be moving on to Mr. Sepulveda. All right, Mr. Sepulveda. We're going to start with your introduction, sir, so get ready for the nicknames. So we're going to start with your valuable training resources. My husband and I both work with Mr. Sepulveda's full line of training DVDs. And again, if you haven't had the opportunity to attend his events, if you hadn't had the opportunity to train at his seminars and get classes with him, this is a great opportunity for you to have access to some of what he has to offer. Now, again, love and respect is one of the ways that we give nicknames to the people that we love and respect. So Mr. Sepulveda's nickname is the Sepulvenator, and you got to say it like you're getting ready to go to the chopper. He hasn't demoted us yet, and so we feel like it's worked out okay so far. And then lastly, before we start the questions, is what Mr. Sepulveda meant to Sigung. And Sigung would oftentimes refer to Mr. Sepulveda as the best man he knew. And that has proven absolutely true. We go to him on regular occasions with problems, concerns, worries, and he always sets the situation straight, and sometimes he sets us straight if that's what's needed in the moment. And we appreciate the relationship we have with him. So thank you for joining us today, sir. All right, and I'm going to unmute you, sir, because it looks like I may be falling short in my duties over here. See if I can do that. One moment.
How's that?
Excellent.
Okay.
Perfect, sir. Perfect.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. It's great to see everybody on board here.
Sir.
Missing the contact with everybody for sure.
Well, you can't hit us, sir, but you're going to have a captive audience, that's for sure.
Well, I look forward to our next lesson.
Sir. Hit my husband first.
Okay.
All right, so my first...
He told me, he's always told me ladies first, so.
We're going to have words after class. All right, so my first question for you would be, what is your favorite story, memory, or carrier of the bounding torch that you'd like to share with us today?
Wow, I think what I learned from early years in the mid-'60s, taking classes with him, was his his demand for, I should say, how he commanded the respect, and how you always really wanted to work for him. He instilled a good work ethic in anybody that took his class, and he demanded it. But that seems like a hard word, but to me it was more he commanded it more than demanded it. And so it was pretty cool to be in the back line and really to aspire to get to that front line, to get closer to him so he can get his hands on you. He worked mostly with the people in the front because they were the most advanced and such like that. But he really had a captive audience when he taught. He's, I thought, along with Mr. and Mrs. White and a couple others like Mr. Wedlake, they have a great communication skill when they teach, and it's very clear of what they're asking. So there's no doubt. And one of Mr. Parker's big things was, what's the purpose of, learning a language and you don't understand the meaning of the words? And he was just a great communicator, and I really that really stuck with me. And that's what I tried to do, or have tried to do throughout the years after learning so much from him that way.
Sir. And what message would you want to leave to your students or your legacy?
I think Mr. and Mrs. White touched on it. It's just, you have to have a passion or a desire for what you want. And one of Mr. Parker's sayings was, you have to have a desire, then you have to aspire, and then you have to perspire. What are you willing to give up to achieve your goals? Good work ethic. Nobody brings you in the door, throws you in the door so much, so to speak. So, that's a good start. But, not everybody wants to put the sweat on the mat, and make it happen. And so, I think it's motivation on my part, for the students, and see, I think, a passion for what I may have to share. And if it's contagious enough, they're gonna put their good foot forward and make that effort. And that inspires me. What they give me, I give back in return. So as much as they want to give me, I'll try to give them even more just to keep them going. It's fun for me. I really enjoy teaching.
So, well, you're amazing at it, and it is contagious because you've empowered my husband and I to be a little bit sharper, hit each other a little bit harder, move a little bit faster. And normally I get hit him more than he gets to hit me, so I think it's pretty awesome.
All right. Hopefully it's controlled. It's controlled contact, correct? Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. All right. And what is the most important thing that you have learned or gained from your personal Kenpo training?
I think being willing to share openly, and look at maybe your students' needs. I know that when I took lessons from those that helped me along my journey, is that they cared about what I asked. They cared about what my goals were, and they pushed me. So I think that's important. Just to recognize where the level of the student is and push them to their abilities and help them, gain, if it's big steps, it's big steps. Some people come in and they're just so talented and they pick it up. Those that really have to work and strive for it sometimes get passed over. And so, that's one of my passions, is to help and assist them to reach their goals as well.
Sir. And then my last question for you would be in 3 parts. What is a priceless piece of advice for those who wish to be a great student, a great teacher, and a great school owner?
Well, I think I touched on the first 2 already. It just, like I said, as a student, what are you willing to give up to achieve your goals? Are you willing to put the time and effort in? One of the things I used to say when I had my school was, I come prepared to teach you. I want you to come prepared to learn. And learning is a 2-way street. I've learned just so much teaching throughout the years from students or the classes that I've taught, by questions that they may ask, and you get challenged. So you have to go to the toolbox and kind of remember what you were taught. And then if you don't know the answer, you go to the toolbox that Mr. Parker gave us in Kenpo, and you try to figure it out with each other. I don't think any one person knows all the answers, but that that being said, if you share the knowledge, it just gets larger. So, and as a teacher, that's the same thing. Are you willing to, be open to learn something from the student? Or, two of my favorites to watch is, Mr. and Mrs. White and Lee Wedlake teach. And there's others out there as well that just have so much to share. I'll sit and take notes, whether they're, written notes or, audio notes to myself. And I've jumped in many, many classes as an advanced belt. I remember after Mr. Parker died, they had the big gathering in Pasadena. And, Tom Kelly was there, Sigung was there, Dave Hebler was there, and there was others that were there that were teaching. And there was nobody in that class above the 5th degree, that if I recall. At the time, I was an 8th, and they were doing technique line. I said, okay, I can't handle this anymore. And I went and I changed and I came out. And Sigung's jumping back and he goes, whoa. And so, but that's, you've got to be able to willing to put yourself out there and not only say what you can do, but you've got to be able to back it up a little bit as well. And so there was a lot of good hand-to-hand stuff going on there, with a lot of sweating going on, but it was all in great camaraderie and, respect, and it was fun. That was a great moment.
Sir. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Thank you so much for taking the time. Please stick around because our guests, the rest of our guests, are going to be having some difficult questions coming your way.
Uh-oh. Look forward.
I see. Sir. Now, I see that Mr. Wedlake is able to join us, which is absolutely perfect timing. So I get to do my introductions. Let me go on over. I can see him. There he is, sir. Thanks for being here. All right. So, let me unmute you here real quick. Do my duty as the host. Excellent. Excellent. That is perfect, sir. So we are announcing, and I already let everybody know that this town hall was your idea, and I greatly appreciate it. When you got to take something away, you put something else in its stead. So you got full credit. And we start with introducing each of our special guests today. And in introducing Mr. Wedlake, the first thing I want to mention is his valuable training resources. He has a Vimeo set up where you have access to hundreds, and I mean hundreds of training videos. My husband and I are members. We use it actively. And if you haven't had the opportunity to train with him directly, attend his seminars, this is a great way for you to level up your Kenpo personally. If we show love and affection, it's normally with Kenpo hits, but it's also with nicknames. And in this case, I get to bring out Uncle Lethal, who we lovingly refer to Mr. Wedlake as, because he is lethal and he's our Kenpo uncle, whether he likes it or not. He adopted us a long, long time ago. And then lastly, I'd like to tell a story. This is what Mr. LeBowney thought and how he felt about Mr. Wedlake. And I've recently just told this story to Mr. Wedlake himself in one of our lessons. We met Sigung in 2006. And in 2007, we had invited him out to come and do a seminar at our school. We'd also invited out Mr. Wedlake, and they were both set up to teach. And we had Mr. Wedlake teach, and then we had Sigung teach. Well, at the end of the seminars, everything's winding down, and Sigung pulls us aside, and he is livid. It's one of the first times he yelled at us. And the reason he yelled at us, he said, "How dare you put me in a seminar where I have to follow Mr. Wedlake. You never do that again." And it never has been done again. He goes, "I will teach alongside that man any day." He goes, "But if you put him first, you're going to make me look bad." And so with that being said, we welcome Mr. Wedlake. We appreciate you being here. And I've got a ton of questions for you, sir.
Thanks. That's always a humbling story. I was very surprised to hear that. But,
sir.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So in light of Sigung's stories, my first question for you is, do you have a favorite story or memory that you would like to share with us about Sigung?
I didn't meet Sigung and get to talk to him until one of Graham Lilliott's Wonder Valley camps, one of the best Kenpo camps I'd ever been to. And so he had invited Sigung down to teach, but I had seen Mr. Labounty many, many times at the internationals, had been within 10 feet of him and had a chance to listen to him talk and interact with other black belts at the IKC and so on. And I knew of his reputation. I had seen the NCKKA team demonstrate, but I really never had the opportunity to sit down and talk with him until Graham Lilley's camp. And just getting to know him better, and we hit it off immediately. And then we did Seattle camp together with Mr. Sepulveda and Mr. White as well. One of the first times the four of us had ever been invited to the same place. And then again over the years, down there in Tucson and so on. But being out at Mr. Sepulveda's camps in New York City, Seagung and I had a chance to talk quite a bit that weekend, and Steve White was there. He listened in. He said those are some of the funniest conversations he'd ever heard, because we just got along so well, and our life stories were very similar, so we could tell those stories back and forth. And it was just we really enjoyed talking with him in person, on the phone, and so on. Always a pleasure to be with him. And I remember being at one of the camps, and he had said, well, come on over here. We need to sit down and talk about taking the 10th. And instinctively I said, I said, I think I might have done that to the wrong person. But he laughed. He said, okay, well, that's settled. We know where that's going. Years and years ago. So there were lots of instances like that. But just to get to know him over the time was just such a pleasure.
Sir. And then what message would you want to leave to your students or your legacy?
My driving force over the years of being an instructor was to pull people along with me, not push them forward. But, everybody says, I want to learn karate. I want to learn it for what reason? I want to be a black belt. I want to be this. I want to be that. I wanted to see people live those dreams, to earn those goals. And I would do whatever I can to help make that happen for them. And I think that I've been fairly successful at imparting that to my students, because that's really what it's about. We're all in this together. And it's not, in my opinion, it shouldn't be a me thing. It's one thing I've noticed about martial arts is one of the sales tags is, well, it makes people humble and it subjugates the ego. And I think that's probably one of the furthest things from the truth from all that I've seen in the years. But when I've gotten closer to people like Mr. Sepulveda and Mr. and Mrs. White and others, you don't see that. We've all gone through that phase in the past, I think, and going out to tournaments and teaching and so on. And you actually do learn how to subjugate your ego. But I would like to have people live their dreams, achieve their goals, and be good human beings in the process. I think that's the legacy that I would like to leave.
That's beautiful, sir. And then the next question I'm going to ask you is, what is the most important thing that you have learned or gained from your Kenpo training?
I actually learned it from my dad, who was not a Kenpo man. But he said, the purpose of going to school is not to learn what to think, it's how to think. And that was reinforced with my training with Ed Parker and the other seniors, Frank Trejo and Tom Kelly and Joe Palazzo and Huck Planis in particular, is they taught principle. And Ed Parker was just so good at getting these ideas across and reinforcing the margin for error concept and how these things would transfer into other aspects of life. I mean, that's what they say martial arts is about. It's about being able to use it in other facets of your life. And it's not just because you're going to eat sushi and rice and all that and do an Asian diet or whatever. That's not what it's about. You learn how to apply lessons that are learned in the martial arts, such things as avoiding. So you try to avoid conflict rather than always having to take it on, but you've always got the option because you've been trained in how to do this. But it was something that I was able to apply during my career as a pilot because safety was a big factor. And I remember hearing Ed Parker's voice in my head when I'd be landing an airplane in particularly tricky situations because it was that margin for error sort of thing that was going on. And that was one of the things that people asked me, said, you ever take Ed Parker for an airplane ride? Because he was really into aviation. He loved it. He used to fly in Elvis's jet. And so he'd ask me questions about it and all that. And I said, why didn't you take him? I says, because I didn't want to be the guy to kill him if I crashed it. God help me if I lived and he didn't.
Sir.
That's why. One of the reasons that I say I never took Ed Parker for an airplane ride. So I'd say that that critical thinking is one of the things that I really got from Kenpo training.
Excellent. And then my last question comes in 3 parts. What is one priceless piece of advice you would give to someone who wanted to be a great student, a great teacher, or a great school owner?
Well, there was a thing that we used to teach in my studio in Florida, and I carried it out into the seminar circuit, was you have to learn how to learn. And a lot of people in a lot of different aspects of life go to somebody and they expect you to open the top of their head and just pour the knowledge in, close it up, and you're good to go. But there is technique to teaching. There's technique to learning. And we would spend quite some time in my school saying, now, this is what we want to show you and get you to do, but this is how we think you can assimilate it better. As my training with Danny Inosanto, one of the greatest martial artists that ever lived, I think, said that when people can accept the reasoning behind something, they can make it theirs. And I believe that he and Bruce Lee both collaborated and they agreed on that idea. And I think it's absolutely valid. So if you can get somebody to understand in the process of learning, they will be a better student. As far as being a better teacher, I think when you're a new teacher, particularly some teachers like myself, when I first started to teach, I didn't have a lot of guidance from my teacher. My first Kenpo teacher was not a good instructor. I was not a good person. But there's a tendency, I think, that when you've got a student and a student doesn't get it, they don't seem to be understanding what you're teaching, you want to point at them and say, what's your problem? How come you're not getting this? And you've got the cliches that when you point with one finger, you got 3 pointing back and that sort of thing. But I think that the first thing should be you look back at yourself and say, now, how can I get this message across better? What would be the alternate method? And this is where learning how to teach comes in. This is why people go to school to become teachers, because they need to learn the pedagogy, the art of teaching someone, and learn how to say, I don't know the answer, but I know where to find it. And I think that makes better teachers. And the fact that, you learn by teaching. In some disciplines, they say, watch one, do one, teach one. Well, yeah, sometimes. But you have to be ready to keep learning too. And that's why when I made the crest for my students, I had my own personal crest made up. And it has the Latin on the bottom, which says Ancora Imparo, which is attributed to Michelangelo, and it means I am still learning. School owners, that's a big, heavy job, as you know. And as Mr. Sepulveda knows, and as the whites know, so when people look at it and they go, well, you just get out there and you teach people karate. How hard could that be? That's just a very small part of the business. So when a person runs a studio, there's just so much to it that you really have to, you got to be a good student. In order to be a leader, you have to have learned how to be a follower somewhere along the line. You need to know the ins and outs of business, and you need to be, I'm going to borrow a term from Ed Parker, flexible in thought and action, where you can't always do the same thing all the time because people come in different shapes and sizes. Ed Parker called it tailoring, where you've got to sometimes tailor your business principles as well. And you've got to understand that this is not just about getting people to do what you tell them to do. Okay? It's a path, you're a guide, and there's got to be that flexibility in it. So I think to be a successful school owner, you've got to have a combination of all those things. You got to have some compassion and an awful lot of knowledge to go along with it.
Sir. Excellent. Well, you are off the hook for a moment, but do stay tuned. We have more questions coming our way from our other guests that are here to be a part of this event. But before we bring that to table, I wanted to know from our special guests we do have here today if there's anything you would like to ask our other panel members or any topic you'd like to hear them discuss with everyone else. You guys get a chance to put each other on the spot first.
Oh boy. I think I'm going to let Mr. Sepulveda answer that.
Sir.
I'm going to defer to my senior.
Begin. Sir.
I had to do something special for your birthday.
Thank you.
Oh, how could I forget? It was just Mr. Sepulveda's birthday. We're not going to sing, but
thank goodness.
Happy birthday, Mr. Sepulveda.
All right, thank you. Well, this is a great gift seeing my friends. It's been a while.
Yes.
Sure missed being out at Mr. and Mrs. White's Royal Family gathering. So hopefully we can be together in March. I really look forward to that.
Sir.
So the question is to Mr. and Mrs. White, how is that shaping up, or is it shaping up?
Well, I'll answer the first part. As you know, camp was canceled this year. And we're kind of hoping that we can resume camp next year, but that's up in the air yet. It has not been decided upon by the directors of camp and all the leadership committee there. So camp is still up in the air, but I hope that this, slows down. Right now it's not. I mean, I work at the hospital, so I can tell you we're pretty full and we're pretty busy. So I don't see it slowing down anytime soon, but I just pray and hope that we get camp next year and we get a chance to do something next year. So.
That's it. It just all depends on the vaccination and how fast they can get it out, and we can get some sort of sense of a normal life again. It's a shame because our hands are tied as far as throwing our function to raise money for abused children right at the same time when child abuse is running up through the roof because there's so many people at home and feeling the stress of not being able to make any money, and for some reason child abuse goes up, and it's just a terrible thing. And hopefully we sure want to, and I know you want to, and God, we all want to get out there and help, but right now it's just figuring out how we can do it.
But on the camp end of things, the kids are being kept track of. And for camp, there was a drive-by and gifts in their backpack. And I made a little video with a couple of my students to give to them. So they were bringing camp to the kids via video and gifts. So there was a camp in sorts. And so they are on their part keeping track of these kids so that they're not completely forgotten. So I do want to say that for the camp right now. They're doing everything they can.
Well, this is John. Well, I hope regardless that you continue to get the support virtually or privately, however it works, so hopefully people will continue to support that need and help those kids.
Thank you.
I know
Thank
our
you.
group
No,
is,
we're going
our group
to
is
post the
committed and
fact
will
that,
continue to do so.
yeah,
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I've seen those studies as well. Spousal abuse is also up. A lot of people are suffering from depression with all these stay-at-home orders. Home is not always safe for everybody. So I think that's a beautiful thing that you guys are able to bring a little bit of camp to them, even when they can't get out, and give them a little reprieve from whatever they're struggling with in the moment. That's really awesome.
thank you.
All right, so I've got a couple questions coming in from our guests that are joining us. The first one I'm going to ask is from one of our black belts, Mr. June. He says, with circumstances forcing us to modify our training in 2020, do the esteemed members of the panel have advice, recommendations, or resources for students in our solo training until it's possible to get back on the mats?
Yes.
Patreon, Vimeo, DVDs. Yes, find the resources that are out there. You guys are welcome to expand on anything that I missed.
Well, the point of doing this training really is safety. You take martial arts for a number of reasons, but personal safety is one of the major ones. And it's not just defending against a physical attack. So you have to take care of yourself, is what we used to teach kids, is like when you teach about respect, you talk about respect for others, respect for yourself, but self-respect includes things like eating the right things, getting enough sleep, drinking the right fluids, studying, improving your mind, working on your discipline, listening to your parents, and so on. So these are ways to defend yourself in one way or another. I mean, you don't want to be the best black belt on the block and somebody looks at you and says, really great karate man, but they're really stupid.
Sir.
So, this in this kind of a downtime that we're in right now, reading, participating in these sort of events is important. And getting out on the mat and practicing your forms. There's this rise of the virtual tournament is an idea that we can see what people are doing, and there's a lot of bashing out there, but there's also a lot of constructive criticism. Mr. Parker used to call them corrective adjustments, so that people can still get some input and improve their quality of their martial art as this thing goes by. And then, of course, you've got the trusted people that you can work with, that you can get out there, and you see this a lot too, that they're still out there banging on each other with or without masks, but apparently they've come to that decision that this is going to be okay, it works for them. So take advantage of those sort of things, I would think.
I think there's an old saying about don't let what you can't do interfere with what you can do. And I think if you really write it down and you take the steps to get yourself in the best shape that you possibly can, stay fit, and get your repetitions at home. I know I saw a kind of a cartoon recently where it showed a picture of the LA Coliseum full of people, and it put, this is a 2021 Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, because there was like 100,000 people in there. So many times people have spent this downtime just drinking or abusing themselves, and when it's time to start getting back into training, they're going to be really in a hole because they haven't taken steps to take care of themselves. So I think just like Lee was saying, stay fit, train, work out. They'd keep in shape if they just followed Barbara around for a couple of days.
Yeah.
You work out as much as you possibly can, and then ready to hit the mat running because you're fit. You're not. You haven't let yourself go.
I agree with all of that. That's well said on both parts there. And one of the things I always ask my students, I said, who are you investing in? Yourself. Is there a better investment? If you've learned just 2 or 3 lessons of any type of martial arts, you have things to practice or to work on. So make yourself available to yourself. You're the best investment there is out there. And I remember reading just recently a quote by Pablo Casals when he was asked why he continued to practice at the age of 90. He said, because I'm making progress, because I think I'm making progress. That's a good one. I really liked that one when I read it. And so, I'm don't have a school out here where I'm at anymore, but my new place, I've got a nice shop. We converted it upstairs into a little studio, and so I can get up there and I go over my stuff. I review my stuff that I've learned from so many different people. I look at what Mr. and Mrs. White have put together, Mr. Wedlake, valuable information, and there's others that are out there doing the same thing. Pick up on those things. If you have a question, write them, call them, email, anything, get in touch with them and they'll help you out. So, and I think that's one of the great things that, if there's a good thing from this issue that we're in worldwide, is I think better communication with things like this. It opens a dialogue, if you will, if you're willing to do that.
Sir. All right. Thank you all. I have another question for you. This one comes from father-daughter black belts of ours, Fiona and Daniel Salgado. It says, during your training, what was one of the biggest mistakes that you've made, and how long did it take you to realize it was a mistake, and how did you rectify that mistake?
Whoa. I'll start with that one. For me, the biggest mistake that I remember, classes, from day one, right to the last one I had with Ed Parker, he always asked, are there any questions? How many people raise their hand and say, yeah, I've got a question. I've got 10 of them. Rarely do you see anybody jump out and say, yes, I have a question. And that was one of the big things that I never did early on. I learned to, and so that was, that was a big learning experience for me. The more you ask, the more I'll give you a quote that Mr. Parker said one time to me. He said, the more you ask, the more I spew. So then after a while, he kind of cut me off after the questions, after 2 hours worth, but but it's very true. Ask questions. There are people out there who are so knowledgeable. And even if 10 questions are asked and you get 10 answers, there's going to be at least one that you didn't know. So you're going to learn something every time.
Okay, I have one to share. Thank you, Mr. Sepulveda. I really like the one about asking questions. That's something that I hope to do more of, something I can improve on myself. My mistake, which I think is a real major mistake, so that's why I'm sharing it, is I impulsively went into karate and fell in love with it and started working it. And the studio closed, and I just kind of merged into another studio. And 3 or 4 studios later, without having done research, I landed at our studio, which was the best thing that I could possibly have ever done. But what I did not do was research where I wanted to go to research the finest studio, and just kind of during my journey as each studio closed, just went into another studio without really doing my homework. So it's important to research who you're going to train with and where you're going to be. And that's something probably the first 6 years or so of my Kenpo training I did not do. I did learn lessons from each one, but I eventually ended up with my husband here. And I'm not being biased, but it's a good thing here.
I think I was talking about the biggest mistake I made was somewhat along the lines of what John Sepulveda said, is not asking questions. But what I didn't do is I didn't stick my hand out and get to know other people. We'd go to the internationals and we always had great success. I'm not bragging, just we did. We had great success. But like I would see John Sepulveda and I would nod to him and always, respected him. But I never really shook hands or became friends. And in about 1993 or 1994, one of our black belts, Jeff White, so I see up on the screen here, financed a trip for me to go to Wichita, Kansas for a camp. And I got a chance to really meet people and meet John Sepulveda and develop just a relationship that has grown. And I think that's a big lesson. I talk to our students about it all the time, is you don't know, you might be missing a friendship with somebody who ends up being your best friend. But you don't know unless you stick your hand out, introduce yourself, and find out what you have in common with them. And then you get a chance to make an educated opinion if they're going to be a friend or not. So I think that's my big lesson that I learned. Be friendlier, introduce yourself, get to know people, and ask about them. And what happens is you get all these rewards in so many ways as time goes on.
I'm going to go with Mrs. White on this one. My mistake was training with somebody that I was in a school that didn't quite feel right, but I stuck it out anyway. And being kind of young and dumb, I said, well, okay, trust the instructor. They'll take you down the path that you want to go. Turned out to be not such a good thing in many ways. But on the other hand, it did get me into the Kenpo system, and it made me inquisitive enough to go and find somebody that actually knew the answers to the questions that I was asking. So one of the problems with that first instructor is that they were not a good instructor, and you could do things, you could kind of sort of do a spinning back kick. But as we know, the timing's got to be right, and you have to do these things so that you don't damage yourself in the process by multiple repetitions, which we didn't get any guidance on that. And so I wound up with injury that lasted for a long time, and it took a long time to work out bad habits over time. So I wish I'd have been a little bit more critical and done what Mrs. White had mentioned here, is like, do a little research and see who you're actually working with. And take it from there.
Sir, I've gone through several schools myself, and I have a lot in common with Mrs. White. I found a teacher I love so much, I married him. I couldn't help myself. I'm going on 17 years strong. All right, our next question comes from another one of our black belts, Leighton Ng. He said, for the panel, with entrance of MMA in popular culture, which aspects of Kenpo should a student focus on in this kind of environment relative to when Mr. Parker founded the art?
What's MMA? Frank Schreier used to say MMA was Mexican martial arts.
Mexican, I don't know this style yet.
I'm going to refer back to what he used to say about flexibility and thought and action. And the fact that he exposed us to a lot of people from other arts, particularly that was the focus of why he set up the demonstrations at the internationals the way he did, is you'd go there and you'd see a lot of different arts demonstrated. And I had asked him why, and he said, because if you're faced with it on the street, at least you have an idea what they might do. And by seeing MMA and knowing principles of Kenpo, you can start to develop your defenses against it, and you learn how to cope with it. Back when we were starting, way back when, it was like, well, what would a karate guy do against a boxer? And I'm sure that Mr. Sepulveda and Mr. White ran into that a lot, and that you learn how to cope with it over time. I think that's pretty much the same principle we would use today.
Keep going, Mr. Wedlake.
Oh, no.
I'd like to, I know in the early 90s, actually 90, right, 89, 90, a couple of my guys came to me and wanted to pick up on the MMA, the grappling. And they wanted to know what I thought of it. And I thought, well, if you're going to go out and do that, you got to bring it back and share it. And so I never discouraged it for them to go research anything. But if they're going to go out there and do that, they need to commit to that instructor or that teacher as well and give them their best. But they had to come back and share it. And it's been valuable to us. I've seen Mr. Well, there's a couple of guys, Mr. Gilbert, I'll just call him Mr. Gilbert. He's on here. He knows McGill. That's, he was one of the guys that went out there along with a couple of others that, did bring it back. And they continue to do that, and they continue to bring it back and share it. And some of the locks and some of the things that we do are, when we start to get in close and start, doing some manipulation, they've shared some really, really, really cool stuff. Things that kind of tighten up what we do. It complements what we do. So why not share it? Why not share it?
It's interesting in the art, especially as I'm getting older. And a lot of our students or student base are older people that are in their 60s and their 70s. Our emphasis for 30 years was on fighting in tournaments and competition. But like the church is made up of many different people, different aspects of the church, I think martial arts is like that too. That are people that are going to be geared toward sparring still. Maybe they're geared towards self-defense techniques. Maybe they love doing forms. And that's okay. We want everybody to be balanced and get all aspects. But as people get older, maybe some of their physical skills don't allow them to do any freestyle anymore. Doesn't mean that you stop martial arts. It means that you put different emphasis on things that'll end up making you better and keep your interest and still develop your skills. So while self-defense is obviously your primary concern, but as we know, it's something that's a great vehicle for keeping yourself in better shape physically and mentally. Gives you a release, stress release. And so there's so many different attributes of the martial arts that everybody has their own individual journey. And it's not like one is more important than the other. The idea is it's made up. Our school right now is made up of a lot of different personalities, a lot of people of different skills. And I really believe that's the way it's supposed to be. And we're blessed because of it.
I like the analogy and the infinite insights into Kenpo with the person down at the bottom of the well, and then all they just see is up what they see. I like the analogy is that you open up your mind and you see, you get familiar and you see a lot of different aspects of training and of martial arts, and all it does is serve to educate you even more so.
Excellent. All right, the next question comes from Todd and Erica Sankovic. I hope I said your last name right. It says there's a lot of online teaching going on right now. Are there any best practices or ideas you have tried, observed, or heard about you could share with us?
I've seen a lot of variations. I can't say that I've done anything more than basically what we're doing with Zoom classes, but I know that at least one school has a 3-person team that does every class. And so you have an instructor who's up there teaching the material. You have a second instructor who directly communicates with each individual who is in that class. And the third person is running all of this as the moderator, versus just somebody doing the material by themselves and broadcasting to I don't know how many people at one time, because this is it's a hands-on art, and there's only so much that we can do over the web. There's got to be that personal touch that goes along with it. So I think that 3-person idea is probably one of the better ways to do it, because it makes it just a little bit more personal.
Sir.
Rebecca, as you mentioned, we have the Patreon site, and I don't want to make this a commercial. Besides the advantages of having it for us, the reality of it is I certainly wish we had this available when I was coming up through the ranks. We've got bag work, focus pad work, flexibility, rolls, heavy bag work, kicking shields, forms. We've had guest instructors come in. We've got history and philosophy, and these are all available 24 hours a day if somebody wishes to do it. So we're really proud of it. it was something that, a lot of times when something negative happens, like the pandemic is very negative, but the positive thing is it's freed us up to have more time. And Barbara and I have done over 50 episodes that we have on there. So I think it's a great learning tool that is available. And if somebody chooses to not do the Patreon site, they can certainly go on YouTube, and there's so much up there that's available if you have the desire to find it. It's there. You just got to look for it and grow from
it. I think Lee really hit it pretty well. I like that concept, that 3-person concept. Kind of follows what Mr. Parker talked about on the 3 points of view. Right now I don't have that capability, other than, especially the new place that I moved into, I've kind of lost speed on my internet, so we're trying to fix that. So, but I work with Todd and Erica Sankovic once a month. They're currently residing in Florence, Italy. And so, to be able to communicate with them is great this way. The neat thing about working with them and the advanced students like they are is that they've worked with me and has experienced hands-on with me for many years when they were up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And so to be able to work their detail out a little bit and talk them through certain things works very well with the advanced belts. But that being said, I like what Mr. and Mrs. White is doing with their Patreon. And like I said, Mr. Wedlake's idea of the that 3-point of view. So that's something I think to consider in the future. So thank you for the insight on that. I didn't even think about that 3rd point of view. That's a great idea. So hopefully in the next week I'll get that speed up, Todd and Erica, and then we can get back to business.
Awesome. I have one final question before we let everyone start their weekends officially. And this one comes from one of our black belts, Cindy Knowlton. For the panel, what is your favorite technique or form? And I'm going to ask the question, why?
Well, I'll start with that. I think my favorite form is long form 4, because the way it was developed, it has all the answers to the form, whether they're hidden to you or not. Every form that Mr. Parker taught, had a violation of rule, but it was to teach you a new rule. And I think 4, covers just about all of that. And, another one that I really like is form 5, because everything is obscure. And so you have to really, know where you are on the floor, be able to make those adjustments from an obscure angle. And then as far as technique goes, I don't know that I really have a favorite technique, because I like to formulate or work what Mr. Parker called variable expansions. If you work your basics and you're solid in your basics, you should know if a person's coming from your right side, your left side, from the front or the back or the flank, and have an answer for that based on, the forms that you've studied, the techniques that you've looked at. Everybody goes, well, that technique won't work. Well, the techniques are designed to teach you variables. They're just to set ideas, not to give, strict answers in combat. And so that's why I enjoy the basics and put those basics into realization, and there's your variables.
Okay. Yeah, I have so many favorites, but I won't go into every single one here. We'll be here till tomorrow. I really like a couple forms here. I love long 2, and the reason I like long 2 is I like the power that you can show in your going from neutral to forward to neutral, and it's a form that you can really show your crispness, your basics, and your power in. I like form 4. I've been teaching it for a long time now, but I've been recently teaching it a lot because most of my students right now are learning form 4. And I like it because I appreciate the lessons that it teaches us. We go over some of the techniques that we don't often do on the brown belt card. And it's I like the angles and the double factors and forward bow and neutral bows there as well. It's a really great form that you can highlight your basics on as well. I like Form 5 because it's just, to me, it's a real moving and dynamic form. On techniques, there's so many that I really like, and what I like is the lessons that I get from different techniques, such as kneel of compulsion. One of the lessons that I like out of that is that we need to constantly be flexible, because plans may not go as we planned, or things may not go as we planned, and we may need to make adjustments. So I like to take techniques and find things that I really love about the techniques and the lessons that they teach, and then teach them to my students. So I don't want to keep everybody here for the next 3 or 4 hours, so I think I'll stop right there.
Personally, I really like Calming the Storm. And the reason, one of our black belts was at the beach a couple of years ago, and he was attacked by some skinheads. And one guy came at him with a crowbar with a full shot to his head. And he was able to move inside and stop the attack and punch to the face. And then there was 3 guys on him, and it ended up just being a terrible, terrible fight. And I saw him later on in the hospital that night, because it was rough. And these guys had weapons, and they were coming after him with the idea of killing him. But the first words to me in the hospital, like 2 a.m, was that Calming the Storm had saved his life. And it's such a basic move, but that idea of blocking with your punch simultaneously, like the idea of going low and coming back in with a back knuckle. So it's a simple move, but effective. And that's one of the things I love about Kenpo is sometimes the most simple move is also could be the ones that could be devastating. And in forms, I'll just go with the standard short form 3. Nice and basic. We do the forms 3 basic levels. You memorize it, you visualize, and you actualize. And I think actualizing short 3 is so easy because every move starts off the first form that you do, all self-defense techniques. And I think people really get a feeling of it being in an actual fight when people do short form 3. So it's easy to kind of embrace that concept of being realistic in your presentation. So it's simple, Calming the Storm or short form 3.
I think for myself, I like any technique where the attacker falls down and leaves me alone. Yeah. As far as the forms go, I'd have to say that 4 is my favorite. Always has been. Competed with it quite a bit. Won a lot of trophies doing 4. I've got a student named Ray Kellison who does 4, and he does short 4. He does an excellent job. He won the world championships with it. And as the other instructors have pointed out, it's got a lot of information in it. And it's got so much that the information is juxtaposed. There's information in it. It's not obvious. And if it didn't keep me entertained for all these years, I probably would have lost interest and gone on with something else. But I'm always finding something new with these forms and by passing them on to other people. And the fact that it's long and it's great for your cardio, it's great for your strengthening your muscles. It helps you with your timing and the mental stimulation that goes with it. And I've told people that, if you think you've got the form down, you're getting a little bit bored and all that, well, try doing other versions of it, such as do all the hands of 4 while you're standing in a horse, or work on a stair climber or a treadmill so that your legs are going in one direction, and go through it in your head, because your muscle memory is going to make your body want to do all the other things. And so you're going to have to isolate your mind from your body to do that. So I think things like that are just kind of fun to do. And run it backwards in your head and stuff like that. So I think 4 is a great tool for things like that.
Mr. Wedlake, I do have to say, I don't think there's many people that can just simply run it backwards as you put it, sir, but it's now on my list of challenges I'd like to overcome.
I think it helps if you're dyslexic or something.
Sir, hey, my husband's going to have that aced.
Gotcha.
I'd like to thank our guests for being here. I'd like to thank the Whites, Mr. Sepulveda, Mr. Wedlake. I'd like to thank Mr. Knight and Mr. Pilch for being willing to be an amazing support structure behind the scenes and give me a chance to be out in front. They put the little kid out in front, so I appreciate you being here with us. And I'd like to thank the 48 participants that spent their Saturday afternoon learning, sharing, and being with their Kenpo family. We appreciate you all. Thank you for being here. Enjoy your weekend.
All right.